Welcome back to Your Anxious Child, 5-minute solutions and interviews with experts. Today, we are talking with Anna Scetinina, who has just written a workbook for children called A Workbook for Kids Who Worry, 50 Ways to Stand Up to Worry. And it is based on a perspective known as ACT. And in this podcast, we have talked a little bit on the ACT approach to anxiety with a podcast with Ben Sedley about a year ago. But today we are going to talk with Anna about her new book and how she incorporates an ACT perspective into helping children who worry. So, Anna, thank you for coming in and talking to us today. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about yourself and where you are and things like that.
Thanks for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here, to be your guest. I'm a psychotherapist from Toronto, Canada, and I work for a private practice, Turning Point Psychological Services. I work with kids and adults suffering from anxiety and OCD. And I'm an author. Thank you for introducing my book. And I'm also an artist.
And your book is certainly filled with a number of delightful illustrations. When we think about helping anxious children, the primary approach that parents are going to hear are cognitive behavior therapy and exposure and response prevention kind of therapy. But ACT is a little different, and I wonder if you could help orient the audience in terms of what what ACT is about and how it's similar or different and compatible or not compatible with the other approaches that people take typically in dealing with for helping anxious children.
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me, I guess, start with just a brief overview of ACT. It focuses on what we call developing a psychological flexibility. So in my book, I talk about developing a flexible mindset. So a little bit easier, I guess, to understand maybe for the audience. And that means working on accepting your thoughts and feelings and focusing on living your life joyfully and meaningfully. And there are definitely similarities between the approaches that you've mentioned, while each one has its own unique focus. ACT is also exposure-based model, so it incorporates exposure to your difficult internal experiences, your thoughts and feelings, and exposure to situations that kids might worry about. So here is a similarity with exposure approach. When we think about cognitive behavioral therapy, there are similarities as well. So ACT also works with developing a new response to your thoughts. But instead of arguing with your thoughts or rationalizing, it focuses on just allowing your thoughts be and teaches some tools and strategies to distance yourself from those thoughts.
So how do you build a foundation to do that? I wonder if you could give how would if you have a child who is, say, afraid of throwing up or afraid of separating from their parents to go to a dance class or something like that. Mm-hmm. How would you approach that from an ACT perspective?
Sure. So, well, first of all, let's look at how anxiety might show up in those situations for a child, right? Let's say a child who's afraid of throwing up, right? So they might, if they are kind of stuck in their worry or in their anxiety, it will show up in what they choose to do. So they might start to avoid going to certain places. They might start to, want to maybe not go to school, or when they do go, they overanalyze, they look around, they see if somebody is pale, to stay away from that other child, or maybe they will be very tuned to noticing any subtle sensations or sensations of nausea showing up for themselves. And because they are anxious, and anxiety does resemble nausea, so and then can show up as being a little bit nauseous, right? So they may interpret their anxiety as being nauseous, so they kind of get caught up in noticing things internally and noticing things externally. And if they get stuck in that worry cycle, it's kind of worry determines what they do.
Mhm.
And ACT would teach some tools and strategies to kind of get unstuck in that moment. And what that might look like, we might want to invite the child to take a pause for a moment if they have those thoughts and feelings, and kind of notice what's going on. Name some feelings that are showing up and name discomfort that shows up, such as, I'm noticing anxiety showing up in my body. I'm noticing thoughts about throwing up. And then they might want to maybe take a breath and come back into their body, maybe stretch a little bit or move a little bit. And then they might want to take a look around and notice where they are, what they are doing, what's around. So engage their five senses. And then they might want to just push the brakes on that worry cycle. And in ACT, we teach various strategies to playfully respond to your worry thoughts, such as even, saying those worry thoughts in a different voice or singing them to a tune of a song so that you kind of can distance yourself a little bit from those thoughts. I'd love to share with you one example. I worked with a kid who has a emetophobia. And what we've done in terms of this unhooking or unstucking from worry strategy, I invited the child to actually draw out their fear, their anxiety. And a child drew their anxiety as like a monster who had many, many arms. And he called him Mr. Panic. And he gave Mr. Panic in each hand like a little sign, and then we put on those signs child's worry thoughts, such as, what if I throw up? Why is this kid pale? Is it happening? What am I gonna do? And the child gave, Mr. Panic this panicky voice, and we played around a little bit with that voice saying those thoughts out loud. And what happened, he started to notice that the anxiety lost its power somehow a little bit.
Mhm.
And the follow-up work was to take this monster with him into his backpack. And when he notices that the fear is showing up, to greet his monster, to
Mhm.
say something like, oh, hi, Mr. Panic, here you again. What? Again, those thoughts about throwing up? Oh, thank you. Thanks for reminding me that that's important to stay on guard for myself. I got it, Mr. Panic. I'm okay. Yeah, so those are some ways to playfully, in ACT way, incorporating ACT principles, work on separating yourself a bit from your worry and anxiety, stepping back, and responding a bit more flexibly.
So, in your workbook, it seems like there's a sequence of kind of steps that the child and with the parent or therapist can take to step back from the anxiety and to kind of really begin treating it like, as other people say, false alarm or junk mail or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, and so one of those steps is first giving it a name or
Yeah. Definitely, that's one of those thoughts. It can be a great strategy to work towards accepting and separating yourself from your worry. Uh, Giving it a name, giving it an image, giving it a voice, in order to respond to it in a little bit of a different manner.
Mhm,
Um, yeah, for sure.
mhm. So, and one of the things you have in your workbook that I like is, asking children to draw the worry, but also making sure that they really put some thought into that. And you have a series of questions to really get them to spend time with it. Because, one feature of anxiety is that it makes us kind of shut down in our thinking. It strikes me if you ask a child, well, what's the worst thing that could happen if you threw up, for example? And often children can't really articulate an idea about what the worst thing is. And I think it's in part because their brain kind of shuts down. And so a lot of your activities in your book are trying to help children spend a little bit more and so that they can really think through, you know, the full experience of, what might happen and the like. Um,
Yes.
what What are some questions you'd ask children to do as they're drawing kind of their worry monster?
Yes, sure. And I like what you say. I also notice a lot that when it comes to what are you afraid of happening, it first gets very kind of superficial. Oh, I'm worried I might throw up, right? So, and yes, and then what would happen if you would throw up? What's after that? So I often ask those questions to see what is the actual fear about.
Mhm,
And then we talk about, well, that would to happen, what could we do? How would you cope with this? Because this understanding of how you would cope with this, it's very empowering, right? It will be very unpleasant, very hard, and I will be able to cope with this. So, in order to get, I guess, to this point, it's super helpful to understand how that anxiety is showing up.
mhm,
And I ask in that activity you're referring to specifically, not only to think about what your fear looks like, how your anxiety talks, but what it tells you. What it tells you that can happen, how does it make you think? How does it make you feel? How does it make you act? Right? So there are lots of questions to really understand what makes you so stuck.
mhm. And one of your questions I like is, asking children if you could, compare your anxiety. What is your anxiety like? What could you compare your anxiety like? I'm not sure I've got your phrasing quite correct, but I thought that was a very useful additional question to ask, you know, to um, to ask the child to kind of think about, what would you compare your anxiety to?
Yes, yes, just to help them understand again through this reference, how does it make them act as well, right? What does it make them do? And also to be, to step back, right? Like I'm not my anxiety. So there's this big feeling showing up in my body and in my mind, and I'm not that feeling. I'm not that thought. It's something that is showing up for me in those particular situations that I'm scared of.
So, why shouldn't we just be bossing our anxiety back? Why isn't, I mean, it's been described as a bully, and why isn't that just the answer? We just need to boss it back.
Yes, even that I do sometimes use. right? Because some kids would resonate more to that approach. That would be, yes, this, my anxiety is like a bully, and it tells me to do things I don't want to be doing, I wouldn't be doing otherwise. So I can be mean with it, or I can be harsh with it. I kind of can put it on a leash. But I prefer to explore with a child more so what is anxiety is really trying to tell you, to communicate to you, to remind you of. And to highlight that protective function that anxiety serves, right? It's actually your brain really trying to keep you safe and sometimes going above and beyond in those situations when you actually can deal with it, right? It kind of worries that you won't be able to deal with it. So if we bring into the dialogue this compassionate perspective, what is your brain really trying to do there? It can shift a little bit the child's perspective on their anxiety and come to what I call in my book befriending your anxiety, right? So having a bit of a new relationship with that big feeling, understanding that it's not there to cause you pain. It's there to protect you, and it's okay for it to be and to
Mhm.
come and let you go.
So, um, what are um, what are some activities you could kind of suggest to kind of children and their parents that could help them develop a slightly different relationship to something that's pretty scary and disgusting, like throwing up? Um, and get out of that constant kind of anxiety of, am I going to throw up today? Am I going to throw up today? And stuff like that. What are some activities that, could help children in that situation?
Sure, so lots of playful activities come to mind, and in my book, I have two toolkits which have 10 activities. So, 10 activities for unhooking from your worry thoughts, and another toolkit, 10 activities for coming back into the present moment. So, when I was creating those toolkits, what was on my mind is that parents can even, photocopy those pages and place them somewhere in the house, maybe in the child's room or on the fridge in the kitchen, as a reminder of what to do when you have, when you deal with your worry. So quick strategies to sort of unstuck a little bit from the worry cycle. And going back to your question with these constant thoughts about maybe throwing up, when we believe into that, right, when we give a lot of attention to those thoughts, they sound loud, they are very prominent, they show up in our body instantly. So when you have a thought, anxiety might instantly show up, right? So the heart starts beating faster, your stomach drops, your hands start to shake. And the unhooking strategies help you take power, like I mentioned before, from those worry thoughts. And that can look like maybe singing those worry thoughts on the tune of a fun song. So maybe you're singing them on a happy birthday tune. Or maybe you say those thoughts super fast and you see what it does to those thoughts. If they have as much power over you and if your heart beats as fast as it, has beaten a minute before, right? Or maybe you say them in a voice of somebody you don't like a lot. So it's like not somebody you want to listen to, right? So those are some examples from the unhooking toolkit. And the mindfulness toolkit is just kind of unstocking in a little bit of a different manner. So getting out of your head and back into here and now and focusing your attention on something that is more useful than those thoughts.
So, you use the phrase kind of unhooking. And I wonder if, which sounds very compelling to me, I wonder if you could just kind of elaborate a little bit more on that kind of phrase of how we get hooked by our thoughts and how we unhook.
Yes, yes, yeah. Thank you for asking. Um, yeah. So what I mean is, when you have these scary thoughts, let me again give you an example. Maybe a child is worried about bees, and it's summertime, and here or there you might encounter some bees flying around. And if they get really stuck on thoughts about seeing bees, being maybe stung by a bee, if the worry really hooks them, they keep thinking, they keep worrying about that happening.
Mhm.
Maybe they think about various scenarios that can happen when they go outside, whether they will see a bee or they will not see a bee, and what would happen and what they would do. And they might also, and it might also show up in their actions. So maybe they don't go much outside, maybe they don't go biking with their friends, maybe they don't go to places where there are flowers, right, blooming. And that's what I mean, they get hooked by a worry. So it's kind of worry takes over, and it tells you what to do and what not to do. And when I say unhook, I mean doing various things that can help you not listen to it that much, allow it to be, allow those thoughts and feelings to happen, right? But do something that you think is more useful to do, makes your life better, even though the feelings and thoughts might be there. And in my example, it could be, noticing those thoughts and telling yourself, oh, I'm noticing thoughts about those bees again. I'm noticing being a bit scared. And I also don't want to lose on the opportunity to spend time with my friends. So I'm going to choose to allow those thoughts and allow those feelings and still go with my friends. And I believe that I'll be able to deal with that situation if that happens, but it may or may not happen. Right? So that's an example of kind of being hooked and then finding a way to unhook a bit.
It's an interesting example because, if you're outside and there are bees, you can run away from the bees. But you're also saying you can't run away from the thoughts about bees.
Mhm.
And you're suggesting that you not try to run away from the thoughts about bees. You can, if you're outside and there are bees, you can run away. But importantly, if you're going to deal with kind of worries, it's important not to run away from the thoughts about bees, but to do something else.
Absolutely, right? So when we can't really control our thoughts. So what happens when we try to run away from thoughts about bees? We have more thoughts about bees. It's a paradox there. And I often tell my clients, that, well, did you try to not have those thoughts? And they would say, yes, I tried. So I would ask, well, how did it work? So they would say, well, not great, because those thoughts still come. And I like to say, yeah, they often come and they bring their friends as well. So you have more of those thoughts. If we could take a bit of a different approach there. So you do have these worry thoughts. You don't like those thoughts, and they're still there. Can we let them be? Can we try to be a bit more playful with them? So, kind of using one of those strategies I already mentioned, maybe, singing them or saying them fast or giving them a voice or just naming your worry, and letting them be while doing something that is still important to us.
So, you have a number of kind of compelling kind of activities for children to engage in. And a, a popular phrase in kind of ACT is learning to drop the rope. And I wonder if you could talk about that because it's an intriguing metaphor and also a possible activity for parents and kids.
Yes, sure. So it's a great metaphor. It's called a tug of war with a monster, where the monster is your anxiety or your uncomfortable feeling. Sometimes it's anxiety, sometimes it's maybe sadness. It's a different story. We're more focused on worry today. However, it would apply to any painful feeling we don't want to experience. And it's like we are playing this tug of war with this monster where we try to push it away or we try to avoid those painful thoughts and feelings. But it's like pulling the rope, right? The stronger you pull, the stronger your anxiety pulls, the stronger your worry pulls. And also, the main problem here is while you're playing this game, you're not doing much else.
Mhm.
Uh, and we explore how we could practice letting go of that rope. And that doesn't mean the monster is going to go away or disappear. So your worry is still there, but now your hands are free, your legs are free. You can do something that's more useful. And you're right, we can actually play this tug of war with a child, so really trying to pull and say, hey, try to win. And also invite the child to notice, what happens when you pull the rope, right? Suppose this is your anxiety and you're trying to pull the rope. What is it that you're missing out on? What is it that you're not doing in that moment, right? And how long do you want to pull? What would happen if you let go, right? And then explore with them that if they let go, the feeling will stay for some time, the thoughts will stay for some time, and then they will eventually pass. But you don't need to wait for this feeling to go, to end, to stop, in order to do something that is more useful.
I like the kind of tug of war metaphor more than another commonly one used to kind of try to get the same point, which is using finger traps. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and finger traps um, don't have quite the same. They don't always work. Children's fingers don't always kind of fit, so they don't really get stuck. And then sometimes, they just end up kind of pulling hard and breaking the kind of finger trap. The tug of war, I
Mm-hmm.
think, has a
Mm-hmm.
more
Predictable.
pleasing
Yeah.
and clearly fail-safe kind of way of communicating that idea of, drop the struggle.
Yes, more predictable in
Yeah,
the outcome.
more predictable. Yes.
Yes, I
Uh,
agree with
um, the One of the kind of phrases that comes up a lot in ACT is the issue of
you.
diffusion and fusion.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about a number of ways of trying to help children kind of defuse. I wonder if you could just explain this concept and what people might do to kind of in response.
Yes, yes. So this is kind of similar idea that I went over with being hooked or unhooking, right?
Hmm.
It's when the uncomfortable, when the worry shows up and you have these thoughts, you feel the impact of that on you. It kind of makes you uh, freeze in a way. You disengage. Oftentimes, when kids worry, parents can see them either having big emotions, right? Like just, crying or, complaining or, just kind of expressing themselves emotionally, or they shut down. And in both of those, situations, they're kind of like they're very much in their worry bubble, right? They're consumed by that feeling. So that's what we call being fused. Um, Viewing it as very important, believing it, being stuck in it, slowing down and stop doing something that is effective in the moment because of the worry. And this idea of diffusion is, kind of allowing yourself to unstuck a little bit and just view it for what it is. Some unpleasant thoughts, some unpleasant feelings showing up in the moment. There's nothing actually happening, there's no urgency, but this worry appears very important to you. And one of the classical diffusion exercises is to first fuse with something and then diffuse from that. And an example can be thinking about a milk, or I like to think about a lemon and do this lemon exercise with my clients. So I say, think about lemon or lemonade and tell me, what do you notice? And often they start to say, yes, I maybe notice, a bit of a soury flavor in my mouth. It's as if I have like a cup of lemonade in front of me and I'm about to drink it. So this is what we say being fused. So when you thought about lemonade or lemon, instantly your body started to respond. So that's natural, that's completely normal. But now you kind of are under this impression of lemon being here while it's not even here. And then we diffuse by saying the word lemon super fast, like this: lemon, 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 for 30 seconds at least. By the end of this time, the tongue is tired, the word does not sound anymore like it sounded 30 seconds ago, and there's no sensation in the mouth at all, right? So that's a super quick example of like being impacted by the idea and then unstucking from the idea. And then I often do the same exercise with kids with something they're scared about. It can be their fear word. And if there is a thought that they are afraid of, we kind of shrink down a thought to the fear word, and then we play a bit with the word to unstuck from it, to diffuse. And they often then use this strategy. It's super simple. You can, if you feel it started to impact you, can you do this by yourself? Of course, kids can do, and that's quite playful. They like the exercise usually.
Yeah, great. That's very helpful. I wonder if we could turn our attention to a central part of ACT, which is, children have these compelling worries that are kind of all-consuming. And one of the points that you bring up in your book is the importance of developing some alternative to that compelling idea. In other words, developing what you want to be doing, what matters to you. And I wonder, and the issue of values and goals, and I wonder if you could just talk about that aspect of the ACT treatment of starting to do what matters to you rather than what anxiety says.
For sure. So values is such a central idea or concept in acceptance and commitment therapy. And then definitely the commitment part is key. So do what it takes to get where you would like to get. And bringing to light what is important to a child in life can help them kind of stay anchored through this hurricane of anxiety when it shows up. And there are some things we can do to help kids identify or get a bit clearer about what they care about and what matters to them. And one of the simplest things to do is just to ask a question, such simple question as, why is it important to you? Is it important to you? What would change if you can do that thing? What would change if you could try this new class? How will it make your life better? What would change if you would be able to talk to classmates more? And oftentimes that makes things, makes kids reflect on, as a result of them doing something scary and brave, what would they get in return? What would they get access to? And if we don't have the answer to this big why question, they will likely not do this scary thing or this brave thing we are asking them to do. And since typically we don't talk a lot about values, right? So my book has very specific structured activities to help kids reflect on what is important to them, what they care about, who they care about, what activities bring them joy, so that they can get some of those answers.
So, what would you do if a child says, well, I just like to play video games and my parents don't let me do that enough? What would you and what would you do in a situation like that where the child says, well, I just want to play video games?
Yes, makes sense. And many kids would say just that, right? So
Yeah.
that's a good question and a challenging one for sure, because it's hard to compete with the entertainment the video games can provide and technology can give. I think it's a similar question in terms of just understanding why, what they like about it, so what do you like about playing video games? What excites you there? Is that about pace? Is that about adventure? Is that about winning? And they might say what many of them will say it's fun. That will be like a super brief answer, just fun. So what's fun about it? Tell me more about what excites you. And then maybe we can talk about, are there any other things you could do that have a component of that? The adventure, the pace, fun part. And talk more about what those things can be. Is it maybe sports? Is it playing a different type of game? Is it, going to a new place? Is that, some further questions about what excites them around video games might help us discern some of their values and how those values can be lived in a different way.
Since we're talking about school age children, I'm also kind of struck with they're a developmental phase where they are developing values.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like it's a fully developed package, but they are very much, in the process of developing, islands of competence this age. They're in an active process of discovering what matters to them, what's important to them. And strikes me that parents can play a critical role in enlarging their possibilities about what might be valuable or matter. Because an anxious children is going to give an anxious, an automatic no almost to trying anything new. I wonder if you have any thoughts about how parents can overcome that automatic no that many children will have to trying anything new.
Well, I think this is so important what you talk about, and definitely it can be difficult for parents because when you hear this no, you're at the hard spot too.
Yeah.
You're not sure what to do, right? You don't want to push too much because you're gonna just encounter a bigger no. You, on the other hand side, maybe feel anxious yourself or worried yourself that you do not let your child explore those possibilities. So it's kind of tricky place to be for parents as well. And at the same time, I invite parents to think about coming up with a super small step in discovering something new for a child. Oftentimes in my sessions when I work with kids and we plan a goal, it's doing some strategies in order for you to be able to ultimately do something that is important to you, probably something brave, moving towards your anxiety. And we need to be very clear and very specific about the goals we set. And it's a process. Because sometimes we say, well, your goal would be to, participate in the class, right? Like, let's say the child is shy and doesn't want to participate in the class. And then we have to fine tune and be very specific about how they can approach this goal, right? What could be a small step towards that, right? Maybe there is a class where they feel more comfortable to raising their hand. Maybe there's a specific theme they would feel more comfortable to raise their hand, participating in the class at, right? So we want to find something small that the child would be more willing to do, and that would be a first stepstone towards this discovery of maybe expanding the repertoire of activities like you were talking about, right? So if they are, let's say, if it's a complete no to try something new, can they start by just watching something about this activity? Or maybe, like, can they watch a video about this activity? Can they just stand by the window and see, I don't know, kids doing taekwondo class and just observe them? Can they maybe step inside and sit for a little bit, right? So kind of exposure-based approach, but driven by values, if this is something the child might get interested in. And as parents, we would just want to encourage them to be willing to give a try.
Mm-hmm. So now, and I'm sorry to say this, but workbooks often get an automatic no from kids. They think,
Mhm.
wait a minute, this is homework. And they might even toss it across the room,
Yeah.
or just, turn up their nose and run into their room or something. How
Yeah.
how can parents use use this book? How can we um, get children kind of interested in kind of the activities? What do parents need to do? Because
Sure.
in the face of perhaps not total cooperation.
Yes, yes. Oh, good question. And the least thing I wanted to happen is this to happen. So for the book not to be seen as a homework or to be seen as an extra piece of work. So I used quite a few tricks to ensure it will be enjoyable experience and a fun experience to work on. And I was, first of all, thinking about which books inspired me when I read with my child. He's right now a teenager, but when he was younger, we did some self-help books too. And one of the books that really my son enjoyed was What to Do When You Worry Too Much by Don Hubner, which is full of practical strategies, fun illustrations, easy to read, easy to remember. So when I was working on my book, I thought how to bring a variety of things a child can do, and my 50 activities include all sort of things to experiment with. So there's like a bit of a science experiment. There are crafts. There are play pretend. There are activities where you draw, activities where you listen to audio tracks, mazes, labyrinths, so bingo cards, right? So very big range of things the child would be doing. And it has a playful style, so the playfulness on its own is also driven by the approach. So the act is very experiential and playful in nature. And I think that can help to take the seriousness of the topic of worry and approaching the anxiety, so that the child would be interested and eager to hopefully do activities. Activities are also very quick, so most of them are 1 page, sometimes 2 pages. A couple activities that are maybe 3 page long, but most of them are 1 to 2 pages long, so they're very easy to do. And I also have some fun characters helping kids to do the work. And one of the characters is giving a science fact, and another, I have a little mouse that hides on every page of the book. So that's for a child to look for, and also to ensure they flipped through every single page of a book. And then there are also some downloadable resources, files that the parents can print out, and audio tracks that parents can download and just even use on the go, have on their phone available for some mindfulness practices. And also throughout the book, kids collect what I call flex coins. So when they do some of the activities, they can collect those coins, and at the end of the book, they get a special award for collecting as many coins as they've done.
Great. I would just add, and this, um, I hope you're not uncomfortable with this idea. I would also kind of suggest that, parents, flip through the workbook to find activities that jump out at them. So, for example, if you have a child who's really struggling with their, kind of anxious thoughts, and it's really just consuming their weekend, that giving giving the parents or assigning them a menu or curriculum of kind of things to do. And I think you had one um, nice example of 10 ways to practice being mindful, and to just kind of suggest for the parents um, to look at activities like this and think, we're going to this weekend sample each of these 10 activities, and let's see what really works out and what can kind of help us. And just, having a collection of 10 activities to try is, which are building one kind of important skill that we need, being kind of mindful and stepping back, can be incredibly helpful. And that um, I personally would, recommend that parents be comfortable just looking around, the workbook and seeing what jumps out at them.
I love this idea. I would recommend that parents first read the book themselves. And I also say they can benefit from doing some ACT strategies on themselves. Maybe they'll find it very useful for their own difficult feelings and thoughts. And for sure, even, like I mentioned, with the toolkits, maybe having like a copy of that somewhere in the house to refer to and to experiment and to try. Absolutely. So that, even towards the end of the book, I have this idea of coming up with my plan to deal with my worry, where I encourage kids to put down their favorite strategies, their values, their goals on one page, so that they can then have it in front of them as a reminder, as a super brief summary of their work they've done in the book, and why is this important to them, what do they want to do, and what are some tools that can help them navigate those challenging moments when worry strikes.
Well, you mentioned parents, and of course, as parents, we're always being kind of tossed around by a rough sea, and we need reminders about where are we trying to kind of point our boat. You know, that compass of what our values are, what's important to you as a family, and what's important to you as parents, and to keep our focus on those values, because in the kind of chaos of raising children, it's not always easy to keep our focus on what's what those values are.
Absolutely, for sure.
So, um, so we're about out of time. Anna, and I wonder if you could tell us where people could find out more about your work, um, um, and for and for people in Canada to find out kind of how to find you and things like that.
Of course, so they can find me at my website, which is my first and last name.com, so Scetinina.com. And on my website, I have more information about my book and where you can get the book, as well as information about my clinic, the clinic I work for, and social media accounts. So they can find me on Instagram and Facebook and Pinterest. So that would be the best place to go and look up some information.
And are you thinking about a second book or not yet?
Uh, I'm still savoring the joy of just publishing the first one, but definitely lots of thoughts and lots of ideas on where to take it next.
Right. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me. Thank you.